The sirens came fast. Two cruisers, lights flashing, pulled up on a near-empty sidewalk in the middle of a quiet suburban afternoon. A few neighbors peeked from their windows. Others stepped out onto porches, shielding their eyes from the sun. All they saw was a boy. No weapons, no commotion, just a boy. Sitting in a wheelchair, reading a comic book outside the neighborhood library. His name was Ethan, 12 years old, sweet, quiet, nonverbal, diagnosed with cerebral palsy at 3. He liked superheroes. He liked being early, and he especially liked that sunny corner outside the library where he waited for his mom every Tuesday after her grocery run. And this time, that corner got him reported because Karen thought he was loitering. Not just loitering, making people uncomfortable, she told the dispatcher. Said he'd been sitting there too long. Said he looked suspicious. Said he might be on something. What she didn't know, his mother was just 5 minutes late because the store was out of his favorite crackers. And what she really didn't know, the boy's uncle, the man who would soon be at the scene, was the chief of police. But before any of that, Ethan was just sitting there, alone, until Karen showed up. It started with her heels clicking too fast on the pavement. She'd parked her Range Rover diagonally across two spaces as usual. She spotted him, small, hunched, focused on his book, and didn't hesitate. She walked up and stood over him like a guard tower. "Hey, you can't just sit here." Ethan didn't respond. She waved her hand in front of his face. "Hello? Are you ignoring me?" Still nothing, just a flick of his eyes, up, then back down to his comic. Karen scoffed. "You don't belong here," she snapped. "This is a school zone. People like you make parents nervous." And then she pulled out her phone. She didn't whisper. She didn't hide. She called the cops right there, loud and proud. "There's a kid in a wheelchair just sitting here. Yeah, no, he looks off, not safe. You better send someone." She didn't even wait to hang up before starting in on him again. "You can't just hang around where kids walk, you know. It's creepy." A librarian inside watched from behind the glass. Jaw dropped. Ethan, still silent, still staring at the page in his lap, until the flashing lights arrived. Until two officers stepped out, hands resting on their belts, already tense from the call. And that's when things started to turn, because Karen didn't realize the man she'd summoned, the department he worked for, it wasn't some nameless squad. It was his family, and they were coming. It was supposed to be just another Tuesday, the kind where no one expected fireworks, just groceries, sunshine, and a quiet routine. Ethan's mom, Sandra, had taken the same route every week. She dropped Ethan off in front of the library where he liked to wait, then drove exactly 10 minutes to the store to pick up his snacks, some fruit, and a rotisserie chicken for dinner. Ethan loved that time. It gave him space. That quiet spot near the stone planter, right outside the library's entrance, was his safe zone. He'd read the same comics over and over, mostly Spider-Man. Something about Peter Parker made him feel less alone. He didn't need much, just his chair, his book, and the peace of knowing Mom would be right back. But Karen wasn't interested in peace. While Sandra was comparing cereal prices, Ethan was being sized up like a threat. And the library staff, they knew him. He'd been coming there for 2 years. He didn't talk much, but he always smiled when Ms. Lisa at the front desk waved. He never made a mess, never caused trouble, never broke a rule. But the woman outside didn't ask questions. She just assumed. She assumed the worst. Across the street, a gardener paused his trimming. He saw Karen pacing back and forth, gesturing wildly, her phone pressed tight to her ear. A couple coming out of the coffee shop slowed down, eyes narrowing as they saw her pointing, right at a boy in a wheelchair. Then came the police units. Two of them. Lights flashing. No sirens yet, but the message was clear. Someone was being dealt with. Ethan didn't flinch. He looked up briefly, eyes blank, and then lowered his gaze. It wasn't the first time someone had stared. It wasn't the first time he'd been treated like a problem. But this was different. This wasn't a stare from across a restaurant or a whisper in a classroom. This was cops. This was red and blue lights. And in that moment, something shifted inside him. He reached into his bag, not for a weapon, not for a phone, just a folded up photo, one he always carried. A picture of him and his uncle, Jerome Taylor, police chief of their district, decorated veteran, community hero, the man who taught Ethan how to wheel up a hill backwards just for fun, the man who made sure every officer on his team knew his nephew's name, and the man who, just 2 blocks away, was finishing his lunch when the dispatch radio lit up with a call. Suspicious juvenile outside the public library, in a wheelchair. Caller reports loitering and strange behavior. Jerome froze mid-bite. He turned to his driver. Get the car. It wasn't just a call anymore. It was personal. Back at the scene, the 2 responding officers were approaching Ethan slowly. Karen was already inserting herself. See, he won't talk. He's just been sitting here for like 30 minutes. I told him to move. He just ignored me. One officer raised an eyebrow. Ma'am, do you know this boy? Karen scoffed. Of course not. I just care about the kids who walk by here. I've never seen him before. He's just creepy and weird. Ethan didn't move, didn't speak, but his hands were trembling now. The photo was still in his lap. And just then, the unmarked black SUV pulled up. The door opened, and out stepped Chief Jerome Taylor, badge visible, eyes locked on the woman who called the cops on his nephew. Karen didn't recognize him at first, but everyone else did. The mood shifted. Fast. Chief Jerome Taylor didn't need backup. He was the backup. He stepped out of the SUV, every inch of him radiating calm authority, the kind you earn, not perform. His uniform was crisp, his posture unshakable. But it was his face that caught everyone's attention. Stone cold, unreadable. Karen glanced at him but barely reacted. Probably thought he was just another officer, someone there to take her side and handle the situation. She waved her hand dismissively. Oh, good, someone in charge. Finally, I'm the one who made the call. This kid has been parked out here for nearly half an hour, just staring. It's creepy, okay? You need to move him. He won't listen to me. Jerome didn't say a word. He looked down at Ethan, who looked up, eyes wide with sudden relief. Jerome gave him the smallest nod. Just enough. Then slowly, he turned toward Karen. Ma'am, he said, voice even and measured, I'm going to ask you to lower your voice and step back. Karen blinked, then laughed. Oh, really? I'm the one calling for help, and I'm the problem now? What? Because I said he shouldn't be lurking around here like some... whatever. One of the junior officers shifted nervously. He already recognized Jerome. He was starting to put the pieces together. But Karen wasn't done digging her own grave. You people are unbelievable, she snapped. This is what's wrong with the world. You can't even protect a neighborhood anymore without someone crying about discrimination or ableism. Jerome still didn't flinch. He just reached into his jacket, pulled out his chief's badge and held it up. slowly and deliberately. Karen froze. Her jaw dropped slightly. It took a second for her brain to catch up. You're... Wait. You're what? Jerome nodded once. Chief of Police? District 7. And that young man you called the cops on? That's my nephew. The silence that followed could have knocked the air out of the whole street. The librarian inside dropped a book. The junior officer stepped back. And Karen? She turned pale. She looked from Ethan to Jerome, back and forth like she was trying to reboot her entire worldview. Wait, I didn't know, she stammered. He didn't say anything. He didn't even try to explain. How was I supposed to know? Jerome's tone didn't change. He didn't need to shout. Because you didn't ask. Karen's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. She pointed to Ethan, desperation leaking through her voice now. He just sat there. It's not like I touched him or anything. I was just trying to do what? Jerome cut in. Assert your authority? Make yourself feel better? You saw a disabled child sitting in public and decided he didn't belong. You assumed he was a threat because he made you uncomfortable. That's not a safety issue. That's your issue. Karen looked around wildly. She was searching for someone, anyone, to back her up. No one moved. One of the officers looked at his boots. The other stared at the library wall. A man across the street started filming. Karen took a shaky step back. Look, I didn't mean anything by it. I was just trying to help. You know, like community watch and all. Jerome turned to the officers. Get her statement. File an incident report. I'll handle the rest with the board. Karen gasped. The board? Jerome nodded. You called in a false report on a minor. You verbally harassed a child with a visible disability, and you did it in full view of the public. I'll be recommending a community citation and a formal complaint with the city's bias review board. Karen's eyes welled with tears. She looked smaller now, exposed, and for once in her life, completely powerless. Karen stood there, arms limp, as if the weight of reality had just crashed onto her shoulders. But it wasn't over. Not even close. Chief Jerome took a slow step toward her. Not threatening, just steady. His voice remained calm, but each word landed like a gavel. You want to talk about protecting the community? He asked. Let's talk about how many times you've called dispatch in the last 3 months. Karen's mouth opened, confused. You think I don't know who you are? Jerome said. You've reported 5 different kids for suspicious behavior. One was riding a bike, one was selling cookies, and now, a 12-year-old boy in a wheelchair reading a comic book. Her face flushed crimson. That's not harassment? He asked, letting the question hang. One of the officers behind him cleared his throat and stepped forward. Chief's right. We've got every call logged. You've used city resources to make personal complaints. None of them criminal. Most of them borderline profiling. Karen's voice came back, but it was thinner now, weaker. I was just trying to keep things safe. You can't be too careful with kids around. Jerome didn't blink. Kids like Ethan are the kids you should be protecting. Then he turned to Ethan, still in his chair, quietly watching, still gripping that photo in his lap. Jerome walked over, crouched beside him, and put a hand on his shoulder. You okay, champ? Ethan nodded once. Want to head home? Ethan nodded again. Jerome stood and faced the officers. Escort Ms. Hargrove off the premises, issue the citation, and flag her name in the community incident database. Any future calls from her get reviewed by dispatch before response. Karen gasped. Wait, you can't? That's targeting. That's oversight, Jerome corrected. You want to be the eyes of the neighborhood? Then expect someone to be watching you too. A small crowd had gathered by now. Parents, neighbors, a few teens on bikes. No one said a word. But phones were out, cameras rolling, and Karen, she knew it. Her voice cracked as she muttered, I didn't know he was your nephew. Jerome's eyes narrowed. You shouldn't have to know someone's last name to treat them with basic human decency. That hit harder than anything else. Karen was escorted to her car. She didn't resist, but her shoulders were hunched, her pace slow. The community that once saw her as involved and passionate now saw the truth. She was a bully in pearls, but the twist wasn't just that Ethan had a powerful uncle. It was what came after. The library staff released a statement supporting Ethan, and Jerome followed up by launching a new initiative, Project Watchtower, a citywide program focused on protecting vulnerable kids in public spaces, training for staff, updated response protocols, and a direct reporting line to the chief's office for disability-related concerns. And who was the face of the campaign? Ethan. His photo, smiling, confident, appeared on posters across town. Every child belongs. Every voice matters. Karen didn't just lose face. She lost the narrative. Because the boy she tried to erase from a sidewalk, he became the reason the whole town started paying attention. By Friday, Karen's name was everywhere, but not the way she wanted. The video had gone viral, not because someone tried to humiliate her, but because someone finally held her accountable. Clips of her berating a disabled boy, then backpedaling when confronted by the police chief, her own words, her own voice, were shared across social media like wildfire. The internet didn't need context. It had the truth, and it had it on tape. Karen calls cops on disabled child, regrets it instantly. Police chief defends his nephew. Public applauds. Entitled woman learns her victim has powerful family ties. Local news picked it up, then regional outlets. Even a national disability advocacy group reposted it, praising Chief Jerome's leadership and Ethan's quiet courage. But the fallout in Karen's real life hit even harder. Her HOA, yes, she was on the board, voted unanimously to remove her from all community duties. Her gym revoked her membership after multiple members complained about her past behavior. Even the book club she used to dominate shut down because it just didn't feel safe anymore. And her employer? They didn't fire her. They just posted a statement. We support inclusive communities. Any actions taken by our employees outside of work that conflict with those values are deeply disappointing. She resigned the next morning, but the worst part? No one defended her. The people she used to gossip with at PTA meetings stopped answering her texts. Her next-door neighbor, whose kids she used to drive to school, crossed the street now when she walked by. For the first time in her carefully curated life, Karen was alone. Meanwhile, Ethan's life took a turn too, but in the opposite direction. His school held a special assembly where the principal formally apologized to him in front of the entire student body for what had happened outside the library. They gave him a medal, not for bravery, but for simply existing with grace in a moment of cruelty. His classmates cheered. And that photo, the one he carried in his bag, it now hung in the front lobby of the school, framed, a boy in a wheelchair, holding hands with a man in uniform, two quiet heroes, side by side. As for Jerome, he kept it simple. No press tour, he said, no victory lap. I did what any uncle would do. But inside, he knew this wasn't just about Ethan. It was about every kid who ever felt invisible, and every adult who ever thought they could get away with making someone feel that way. Weeks later, the buzz died down. The trending hashtags disappeared. The shares slowed. The world, as it always does, moved on. But in one quiet neighborhood, something had changed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was subtle, like a door that finally closed on something ugly, letting the light back in. Neighbors looked each other in the eye a little more often. People who had once walked past Ethan without a word now stopped to say hello, or to hand him a new comic, or to simply acknowledge him with a smile. Sandra, his mom, found herself receiving handwritten letters from strangers, parents, teachers, even teenagers, thanking her for raising a son who showed strength without saying a word. One letter said, "You don't know me, but my daughter uses a walker. What happened with your son gave me hope." Ethan didn't understand all the attention. He didn't seek it. But he noticed one thing. For the first time, no one looked away. At school, he was invited to join the art club. He got to paint a mural with his classmates. And at the center of that mural, by popular vote, was a boy in a red hoodie sitting in a wheelchair, with a golden cape flowing behind him. Jerome came to the unveiling, quiet as always. He stood in the back, watched the kids cheer, watched Ethan beam, watched a whole school take one giant step toward kindness. And when Ethan rolled up to him at the end and held out the original photo, the one he used to carry everywhere, Jerome smiled and nodded. "You ready to trade it for a new one?" he asked. Ethan nodded. So they took a new picture. Same bond, same strength. But this time, Ethan was smiling, and the caption they added beneath it, printed in bold letters, read, "He didn't need to speak to be heard." Karen never showed her face at the library again. Her house still sat at the corner of the neighborhood, but her curtains stayed closed. She was no longer part of the conversation, and truth be told, no one missed her voice. The world didn't need her brand of concern. It needed people like Ethan, people who endure, people who rise, people who remind us what justice actually looks like when the uniforms come from a place of love, not ego. And in the end, it wasn't the flashing lights or the viral clip that made the difference. It was one boy, one uncle, and a whole community finally waking up.